Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Tigre Gardenia. Ah, ah, I have this thing with recording. I always kind of struggle at the very, very, very beginning and at the very, very, very end from the perspective of I never know how much chit chatty stuff you want. What do you want to hear about? Do you want to go straight into the episode? Some people are really great about going straight into the episode. I tend to chit chat about what I'm doing. When I do the live consciousness commentary on Fridays, which is on YouTube, oh my goodness, I realize now that I chit chat a lot at the very beginning before we actually get into the paper. But that's okay. It's the way that it is. And if you like the chit chatty, let me know. Especially because I'm totally pumped. Yesterday, I had an all day retreat. I got called in, and I live in Damanhur, one of the largest spiritual communities in the world. We have a lot of different mechanisms, let's say. So one of the bodies of Damanhur called me and a group of people in for an all day sort of retreat brainstorming session that I think went completely opposite from what they were expecting, and yet amazing. But because of the people, you kind of come into a meeting sometimes where you don't know who's there, and you look around and you're like, how the hell did they choose this group and why? Well, about halfway through the morning, I realized why, and it was brilliant thinking on their part. Super amazing. I love when I have the chance to be in a room which happens often, thankfully, with all the events that we do in the naturally conscious community, to have a grouping of brilliant people in there. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all of that. If you want to hear more about Damanhur, about the things we do in Damanhur, about my life in Damanhur, leave me a comment and I will figure out a way to do it. Maybe I'll just do a whole episode where I talk about my life in Damanhur, or bring a few Damanhurians around so that you can check it out. You let me know in the comments, or come into the naturally conscious community and let me know there. All right. But what are we going to talk about today? For so many years, I felt like my interests, all of the things I was interested in, all the things I really wanted worked on, were actually, believe it or not, a flaw. The idea that I had all these different thought processes and all these different areas of my life that I wanted to explore, especially when I was growing up, felt like, you were doing something wrong. I was told, like many of us, I'm sure, to specialize. And so to pick one path and to stick to it. But the truth of the matter is that every time I tried to do that, whether it was when I was dancing or when I was doing something else, it really felt like I was denying parts of myself. It wasn't until I discovered the whole wisdom of ecosystems, the ecosystem thinking, the thinking like an ecosystem, thankfully, thanks to the plants in the Sacred Woods Temple of Damanhur, that I realized something profound, which is that in nature, thriving isn't about focusing on one thing. It's kind of almost why we struggle to identify certain types of plants, because they have so many different characteristics that that if you're in one context, you might recognize that plant for one thing. And if you're in another context, you might recognize that plant for another thing. It's really about weaving together everything into this harmonious whole. And so today I want to share how I went and how I worked through this phrase that haunted me when I was a kid, which was actually not a kid, all the way through my 20s, even into the beginning of my 30s, jack of all trades, master of none. And how I finally realized that statement is so wrong, became the ultimate gift that the plants gave to me. And I want to show you how embracing your multi-passionate nature can unlock incredible opportunities for personal growth, for evolution, and for purpose. So this is such an important topic. I really can't wait to get into it with you. So with that, let's get into episode 92. Stop searching for your one thing. Welcome to ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigre Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious community. For over a decade, I've been known as a world ambassador for plant advocacy, working closely with plants to share their practical wisdom to help you consciously embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. In this podcast, I delve into ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways of plants. Together, we'll explore how ecosystem thinking helps you overcome limiting beliefs, understand the true nature of relationships, and live an authentic, impactful life. So here are some of the key things that we're going to touch on in this episode. First, the misunderstanding of this whole jack of all trades, master of none phrase. Also, how you go from multi-passionate to masterful. So what does it really mean to embrace diversity and look at that as a strength? Not just diversity in a group, but diversity in yourself. Spent a lot of time yesterday talking about diversity when it comes to a people, a group, a community. But there is a lot to be said and probably very little that is being shared with you about the diversity of self. And from there, we go into learning from nature. What is it that nature shows us in this ecosystem thinking and about the mastery of the whole? And I really want to get into some practical steps. Actually, I'm going to give you an exercise at the very end that can help you sort of step deeper into this and deeper into your impact. My hope, as always, by the end of this episode is I want you to feel like you can finally live all of those passions that you have freely, and to see that your ability to bounce back and to move from one to the other as a strength, not a hindrance. Inspired by this, by what nature shows us, by what nature awakens inside of us, I really hope that you're going to see yourself as a whole ecosystem, able to harmonize your diverse talents and to really move and weave together these different parts of yourself into a meaningful and impactful life. I mean, honestly, we're already starting to have so many good conversations about the fact that, like, your gut biome and the whole idea that we have biomes in our body. So physiologically speaking, we are getting closer to this concept. It's in the emotional, psychological, talent-based piece where we still have a little bit of work to do. So before we get into all the details, I want to share with you one of our eco-conscious business partners. The first time I connected with a plant and actually received a response, I got chills. It's such an invigorating sensation when you make a breakthrough like that and realize just how connected we are and that we are nature. As a nature-inspired mentor myself, I was super excited to stumble upon the Shift Network and its mission to empower a global network of evolutionary change agents. Talk about my kind of movement. There are so many inspiring thought leaders, healers, empaths, and other visionaries all under one roof, each one on an individual and collective mission to help you reawaken and co-create a just and prosperous world. Check out the show notes and click on the link to learn more about the Shift Network. Consider enrolling in a course or two. Their programs are the perfect complement to your evolving, naturally conscious life. Okay, so let's get into the first point. This massive, in my opinion, massive for some of us, misunderstanding of the term jack of all trades. So, and really how this term has changed or has impacted people like us. All of us, multi-passionate, multi-potential, probably also neurodivergent type of thinking that how you see yourself, the image that phrase brings up. Growing up, I have to admit, I was completely haunted by this phrase. It seemed to cast this massive shadow over everything that I loved about myself. My curiosity, my vulnerability, my ability to adapt to different interesting groups. To me, I thought originally it meant that if I enjoyed many things, this phrase was telling me that I couldn't actually be good at them. The more I liked things, the more diversity there was in my life, the less effective I could be. That was the message. And this belief followed me in everything. For example, I danced. I danced for probably about solidly dancing, taking lessons, going to dance class on a regular basis, about 9 years of my life. But I didn't stick to one style. I did ballet, I did jazz, I loved Spanish dance. I really just loved to skip around and to try all these different things. I was also didn't help that, as you know, I have body dysmorphia. It didn't help that I was chubby and I couldn't really jump really high, but that wasn't the point, right? The dancing had a whole other series of expression. It was extremely flexible and, in my humble opinion, I feel like I'm graceful. Maybe somebody else might not agree with that, but I thought I was graceful. And so I thought I had other things to bring. But the idea of being a dancer, it was, again, because I loved so many different styles, didn't really fit into it. I also was the same way academically. My interests ranged from math to social sciences to music to theater to I really just loved it, exploring all these different kinds of academic topics. And while I was relatively a good student, and I did have a period in my life, especially where I was in a high bracket, like in relation to my studies, I wasn't considered in some ways to be, academically successful because I didn't have that one point, like this is the science person or this is the math person. And to be honest, it really filled everything. My social life was just as eclectic. I could have been with the academic nerds in one way. I love nerds, by the way. No, nothing shady there. And the next day I was hanging out with the heavy metal crowd because I really loved, everything. It was the 80s, heavy metal, rock and roll, all of that kind of stuff, glam metal. I could go to the extremes to be in super technically proficient bands to, like, I don't know, super, I'm thinking of bands like Vane and stuff, which were really glammy at the time. And I just loved it. I just couldn't fit into one little box. And at the time, while I would enjoy it from the perspective of what I was doing, when I would sit back and think of my life, or you come home and you're trying to think about yourself and you're trying to put yourself into these teenage boxes, I would think of all of this as a massive flaw. Even when I excelled, receiving awards, or even, opening myself up to new opportunities, I tried to downplay my achievements because they were spread out across different areas. So I didn't see the value of one for the other. It felt like really society didn't value my breadth. It valued focus, specialization, and clear direction. And this mindset honestly followed me into university. I studied music engineering and electrical engineering, but before I got into that, I was doing philosophy, sociology, and psychology. Yes, all three of them together. And my focus was on law. And so it was all about law and such. So I came in with this kind of breadth already, and then I got into this engineering where everybody was focused. I was this type of, the people were this type of musician and this type of engineer. And I did piano for a while and then switched instruments, which is not something that's recommended in a music school, in a university level, over to voice, because the music performance wasn't my biggest piece. And then I did recording studio and live sound. I just couldn't resist exploring acoustics and band management and equipment repair. Outside of class, I ended up taking, multiple internships because I really wanted to feel the practical nature of what we were doing. So I worked in a radio station. I worked in a recording studio with REM when they were doing the Monster album. And I was a second engineer to a whole series of really interesting characters because it was one of the best studios in South Florida at the time. And I even went into, like, for example, at night, I would go work with different bands. I was doing merch stuff. I mean, I was just trying to explore the industry that I was in, while at the same time, I also was exploring all areas of hockey because I was really into hockey. You're starting to get the picture, okay? I kind of, from some people's eyes, lacked direction. I thought I had tons of direction. It was just going in multiple places. So when I thought about a career, I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. I had no idea. I believed, how do I say this? I believed that I kept trying to convince myself that if I could only pick one thing to be great at, then I could be somebody. I didn't have a dream of, like, I'm going to be this person, because I couldn't figure out how all of my different talents were going to connect together. And I believed this so strongly that I didn't recognize the real reason opportunities kind of kept coming my way. When things would show up for me to do, or job opportunities, or people would ask me to do things, I thought it was a fluke. I never So I didn't really become super good at networking. I didn't get so really good at selling myself because what was there to sell? I was just this big amalgamation of all these different types of things. I couldn't connect I used to say this to myself. I remember when I was working in the corporate world, I would say how I didn't know how to connect the dots. Like I couldn't see how things fit together, which is hysterical now, since it's one of my biggest strengths. One of my biggest strengths is to be able to recognize in a wide landscape with lots of dots, how it is that those dots sort of come together. How do you weave those threads together? So I always find it hysterical to think that when I was younger, when people would ask, I was not a big idea person. I couldn't see the whole because I was participating in so many different parts of, all the small aspects of it. So to me, they seemed like unrelated skills and experiences throughout all of that time. Oh, if I only knew then what I know now. I just really thought it was luck. I totally thought it was luck. I never realized the power of my adaptability. Like I didn't realize that I was really good at adapting. I didn't realize that I was really good at adapting while still maintaining my core essence. Because in all of this, I never felt fake. In other words, I didn't go into a group thinking, oh, I need to adapt to what that group is doing. What I did was kind of the opposite. And I'm sure some of you know how to do this, but I hope that you will realize that this is actually a skill that you can enhance and bring out, which is you go into a group, you start to hang out with that group, and you realize that there's parts of yourself that love what this group is doing, and those get enhanced. And then when you're in that, you pull little threads from the other stuff. So none of your other things get occulted, which is, I think, the big difference. The people who are faking it, and you've probably done this too, because you felt like you needed to, which is you go into a situation and you hide all these other parts of yourself. I never hid my other parts. I just allowed the part that was most connected to that group to be the front face. And then I would bring in other aspects, which I always thought was so much fun because I had the opportunity to, in a very comfortable way and in a very safe way, which later on became my skill for creating safe space, to introduce new concepts because the people, the group knew I was one of them, knew I understood them. Whether I was hanging out with, like I said, academic nerds or the freaks or the heavy metal folks, they knew I knew them. They knew I was part of them. Probably not to the same level that they were, which, was the other side of the coin, but still they knew I got it. And so when I would talk about something different, it was like, okay, let me introduce this with words that they would understand, words that fit into the frame of reference that they are. And over the years, that skill has allowed me to introduce concepts into groups in a way that feels very safe and nurturing. And that's that adaptability and that curiosity. I didn't start to see this strength until I was way older. And that phrase that I had been haunted by, which was jack of all trades, master of none, the idea that breadth is actually a weakness and depth is actually the strength, started to lose its grip. I started to understand very, very, very slowly. By the way, this is a path that probably took me, I'm going to be really honest with you, about 20 years. Around the time of, it took me, about 20 years, maybe 15, to actually step into the idea that jack of all trades didn't mean I was aimless. It meant I was dynamic. The turning point really came when I found myself, for example, let me say this, my first turning point, my first sort of awakening to the idea that, oh, wait a minute, things could be different, was when I realized that I had, in my corporate life and in, working at Microsoft, and I had reached a level, what many people would consider to be successful, right? I had the life people really wanted to have. And yet it was deeply unfulfilling, but not unfulfilling. And this is, I think, where I differ from many of the people that I hear. Many people leave corporate life because they say, I can't do it anymore. I hated it. I hated the grind. I hated the hustle. I hated all these types of things. That was not my case. My case was I wanted more. I felt it limiting, not limiting in that career. Although, to be 100% honest, for those who knew me back then, I did have a period where it was really bad. My boss hated me, all these types. Anyways, again, if I only knew now, like knew then what I know now, I did have a bad period. But more than anything, I had, and this was the last boss that I had, we had this conversation a lot because he's also somebody who went on to do amazing things, amazing things. And I so grateful for the time that we did have, that we worked together. And there is a part of me that wishes I would have followed him because he kept telling me, do not leave. Trust me, we're doing shit work right now, but we're going to be able to do amazing things soon. There is a little bit of kicking myself because if I would have listened to him, but again, it would have been super specialized in an area that honestly today only partially interests me. I felt like I just didn't have enough breath. And that turning point came when I was acting, I started to sing, I started to, be in the arts world as well as my corporate life. And I met a whole group of people that were multi-passionate individuals that were doing it. They were living these lives that were just so much more, I want to say enriching, but it's not that it was enriching. There was so much more, period. So much more to it. And that reminded me when they pulled me in that my diversity, the fact that I could perform because, I could sing, I could dance, I could be up on stage, which is how I walked into this. But I also understood technology. I understood marketing. I understood communications. I understood the psychology of circus freaks. Like I understood a whole series of other things. I knew how to touch the jock world. I knew how to touch all these other worlds. That became this massive strength that thankfully I was able to put into practice because I left my corporate life and allowed myself to what's when I started my production company, my first company. And I started to put together things that were different. I started to create things in my vision, and I started to realize that I had vision. When I started to work with plants, that brought everything that I just talked about into conscious thought. Like all of a sudden it was, I did this, and this. Oh my goodness. That means that if I apply what I did unconsciously in this way consciously, I could do even more. Like it was just this amazing idea of recognizing all these traits inside of myself and how this diversity contributed to the ecosystem that I was creating as an overall whole. And that's when I realized in all of that, which is I'm not a jack of all trades. And a master of none. Like I am a jack of all trades, but I am a master of the whole self, my whole ecosystem of talents, my whole range of experiences and passions, and all of these elements together. I can master them to create or co-create really the ecosystem that I want to be in. And that's when it flipped from me being able to say, and so are you. Because up until then, it had been my unconscious journey. Once it became conscious, once it opened, this whole path opened itself to being able to see why those opportunities that were coming to me were not dumb luck. They were the results of my expression, of my putting into action, of my not being afraid to jump from group to group. I wasn't jumping from group to group because I was hiding things. That's a very different thing. I wasn't jumping to get away, which is again a very different thing. Trauma and fears and those types of things can take hold, and that can look very similar to I am jumping around because I have lots of interest. That is not the same of I am jumping around because I don't feel comfortable or happy or as if this is for me or I am capable, or the very famous I am not worthy. That jumping around is an avoidance technique. My jumping around, and the jumping around I want you to be able to do when you have multiple passions, is a conscious adaptability that brings everything you are into the new environment and then focalizes it. Focalizes it is focalized into, yes. Focuses it, excuse me, I'm thinking in multiple, focuses it in one direction. So you, for that moment, or better said, allows one part of you to become the shining light and everything else to be the fuel, to be what keeps that light and what colors you shine in that light. That is really the difference, bringing it into conscious awareness, not focusing on one thing only and negating everything you are, but allowing you to move into environments and even switch from environments where you take all of your talents and you orientate it towards one direction, but you're bringing everything else in with it at the same time so that you can pull. That is that weaving that I keep talking about, that weaving your multiple talents together. This is what it means when I walk into a meeting like yesterday and I can use a reference to hockey, or I can use an analogy connected to, I can be talking to all these a trauma informed facilitator, a conflict resolution, a trainer of, corporate trainer. We can have these amazing discussions of our facilitation skills, of our ability to help others, while still maintaining our vast what's the word I'm looking for? Our vast tool chests with us, and we can allow each one to shine through their specific light and still enhance that light through all of our experiences. And that was the ecosystem that we were creating. This brings me to the second point, which is for all of us need to find the thing that helps us understand who we are. And that could be multiple things. Again, we're multi-passionate. We're very alternative thinking. And so there are going to be lots of different things. For me, it's been nature has been the connection to plants has given me an overarching container that says I am a being of nature. Therefore, all these things I see in nature, which is so diverse, right? Temperate rainforests, temperate forest, rainforests, deserts, ocean, plants. There's so many different types of environments that plants come in. And yet there is this sort of uniting factor of the fact that we're all, nature, we're all plants, and we have all this aspect to it. And so this has been for me my unifying factor that includes that alternative thinking, right? And what is it that plants teach us about the value of multiplicity and of integration and of being adaptive while not losing your identity? Like I said, I was constantly torn between my various passions when I was a kid, and being able to have all these different parts of us. But when I was in my 30s and I felt like I was sort of like had to make a change because what I was doing was not enough. When I, for example, now I lost my train of thought. I lost my train of thought. I'm trying to figure out where to come back into the train because there's just so many things that I want to talk about. And I want to be specific because I want you to feel like you're walking away here with not just a realization of yourself, but also ways for you to identify how is it that you put all of this into practice? What does this mean about you? Where do you go with it? How do you blend these different parts of yourself? For me, for example, my technical know-how, my creativity, my ability to connect across disciplines. These are all these hallmarks of my passion itself. My language skills, my ability to be able to flip in one culture to another, all of these sort of shifts meant that I had to start to look at being a generalist, not as a bad thing, but on the contrary, not as a lack of direction or lack of specialization or lack of depth, but actually as a superpower. Like multiplicity became my specialization. I am specialized. I am specialized at using lots of different things. I am specialized at moving through a wide breadth landscape of tools. Did I ever tell you that I actually wrote a draft to a book that is called Your Spiritual Toolbox? And I wrote this book from one of my projects, which was called, what was it called? Answers from Bina? Yeah, something like that. Answers from Bina. It was a Kabbalistic kind of Dear Abby website that I had for a while where people could ask me questions and I would respond with either rituals or meditations or something to help them find the responses to what they were. And it was great. And I wrote this book draft that was about all these different tools. And I called it Your Spiritual Toolbox because obviously at the time, as I am today and as I still use, I don't really have one specific type of tool that I use. I use sometimes meditation and sometimes art projects, and I use sometimes writing and sometimes speaking, and I might use ritual. I love using ritual. And even in rituals, I have a long breath. I mean, a wide, not long, wide breadth of all kinds of different types of rituals that I work on and that I use. Sometimes it might be a short-term ritual. Sometimes it might be a very long-form ritual. Sometimes it be more like spell casting. And, all the work that I do with plants. Basically, it was your spiritual toolbox because I wanted to show you and that there are many, many, many different types of tools and how to apply tools and what is the application of them, which is really just another way of saying, I'm another multi-passionate. I'm passionate about all these different topics. And so therefore, I want to bring them together into something. Somewhere around there is that draft of that book. Maybe, who knows? Maybe one day I'll pull it out and I'll do something with it. It would be really great to do it. Anyways, it was really this mindset shift in the forest. So I was walking around the Sacred Woods Temple of Damanhur one day, and I sat down at some point and I kind of felt called to sit there. And as I was looking around, I got this message that was like, no, look around. Look around. There is no junkyard here. There is no dump. Everything that you're seeing is being used by somebody. So all of these traits that you have, even those that you keep trying to get rid of, my critic, which you've heard me talk about, my judgment at the time, all these different parts of yourself that you think something is wrong with, all these different ideas and passions and different skill sets that you keep trying to put away in a box as if, I'm not going to use them now. All of these in an ecosystem get used. Everything gets used. So therefore, it's really about changing the way that you apply them. You want to use them. You want to switch into everything. And that was that constant, that shift that I talked to you about, that shift that went from, oh my goodness, I have been doing this without realizing it and punishing myself for doing it because I thought it was wrong. When now I can consciously do it and put it to use for myself. And wow, so much of my life changed, but also for others. I mean, now I work with creative, neurodivergent individuals that are brimming with ideas. They have so many ideas. They think something is wrong with all these ideas. They come in with this same struggle. Plus, they keep looking at themselves as if something is wrong. They're serial entrepreneurs. They have countless different projects, or even within one thing that they're doing, their mind pings to all these different pieces. Some of it induced by fear. Let's be honest. It's not that we don't have fears as multi-passionates. On the contrary, some of them are being redirected because of fears, or I'm not good enough, imposter syndrome, I am unworthy. This is coming too easy. Oh my goodness, the multipotentialite struggles from this because some of the passions we have come so easy that we don't even consider them. Because if it comes easy, why that doesn't mean anything. If it's no pain, no gain, right? We have all of these, or I have so many that it means none of it's going to work because I'm going to start something and then I'm going to jump over to something else. We don't see how starting something and jumping to somebody else could be the continuation of that something that you started. We don't necessarily always see the thread that connects them. And that's where I come in now, because with this conscious realization, I can help you see it. I can put that landscape that you're already building, that ecosystem that you're creating, I can lay it out in front of you in a language that you understand. For some of you, that might be visual. For some of you, it might be through music. Some way it might be through some kind of mathematical equation. It doesn't matter. We can find it, right? We can map out your unique ecosystem of talents and passions and start to consciously see for you how they have been coming together this entire time. How you are actually the unknown master of a whole series of things that you haven't allowed yourself to accept your mastery on. You've been too humble, too humble. And how not only do you have to be can you be a master of all these individual things? And let me be really clear here. Mastering doesn't mean you are the most amazing violin player in the face of this earth. You could be, right? But if you play violin and drums and this and that, you're probably an amazing violin player. But look, let's be honest. I'm not going to put you up there. I was going to say some famous violin player, but I don't. The only person that's coming into my mind right now is a cello player, which is Yo-Yo Ma, because he's famous and probably you would understand. So let's go to cello instead of violin. You're not going to be Yo-Yo Ma, who's only been playing cello for his entire life. But that doesn't mean that you can't be the master of why cello playing is important, or of the elements you get out of cello playing that you then apply them to, I don't know, your current day job, or to the business that you're creating, or to a ritual that you're writing, right? You take the elements, the mastery of the elements that are important to you, and you apply those elements in another location. That is really the main power force of a multi-passionate, multi-potentialite. A person with multiple talents, yes, has the mastery to a certain extent of that talent itself. But more than anything, you get to master what you take out of that talent, right? You know how when you watch Masterclass, like if anybody's ever watched any of these masterclasses from Masterclass, whatever it is, .org or .com or something like that, and you see, Yo-Yo Ma, who comes and tells you why his cello playing has changed his relationship with somebody else, right? Because he applies these principles in other areas. You're not necessarily getting a masterclass from Yo-Yo Ma on how to play a cello. You're getting a master or a master gardener who's trying to you're not necessarily only getting a master class on this companion plant to this companion plant works together and you want to plant them in this month because the temperature is like this. That's one element of it. But it's also the listening to the garden or listening to the music and that emotion that comes through it and all these other aspects that they teach from it. As a multipotentialite, more likely you are taking those types of elements and bringing them into other things you do. That is that famous weaving I'm talking about. The weaving is, what are you getting out of it? What is the experience that comes to you from that, for me, hockey game, or from whatever it is, exercise that you might love to do, that crocheting or that knitting. It is the pattern itself that you get to build, the knots, the knowing how to do it, the being able to create a sweater or a character. But more importantly than that is all the collateral skills. That's the mastery. That's the weaving. Multiplicity doesn't dilute your potential. It absolutely doesn't. It's the opposite. It enhances it. Every skill, every passion, every so-called detour that you have taken contributes to this unique pattern. Just the same as every plant does this in their ecosystem, because they have to adapt to the changing conditions around. So they have to take all of their different elements and apply them in different ways. They apply them in one way to fungus. They apply them in another way to, another plant that's living nearby. They connect into the sun in one way when it's clear day and in a completely different way when it's cloudy. What happens when another tree or a different kind of plant grows over them, or when an animal takes root in them? All of these things are detours and changes, and the plant is constantly pulling up from all of their skills, everything that they've experienced, and adapting and using that to create their own unique pattern. And this is what you're looking to do. What is your unique, deep pattern that you're expressing and that expresses your role in the ecosystem of your life? When I began to understand this element, something absolutely incredible happened. I stopped fighting my nature. I was able to sit in all of this duplicity and multiplicity that is me and apply it consciously. Whatever environment I go into, I know I can thrive in that environment. I know I can make this environment work for me. Sometimes I'm going to change the environment. Sometimes I'm going to pull from different parts of myself to adapt to the environment. Sometimes I'm going to partner with the environment and I'm going to create something completely new for the environment. I am going to work that way. And that's what my clients are doing. My clients are learning how to recognize that all of that ping, 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 ping that's going on in their minds is actually their mind's way of processing. It's almost as if you're scanning the environment and then scanning yourself to see all the different ways. And this is really how the natural world also does it. That's why we talk a lot about awareness and perception and all these different senses that plants have. That state of awareness, of conscious awareness, well, some would argue the conscious awareness, but that's a conversation for the plant conscious commentary. Let's just call it awareness. That everybody agrees that plants are aware of their environment and they're constantly scanning. They're constantly active in doing this. That's why ecosystems are my ultimate teacher. They're my ultimate way of understanding and working with the world. And this is why understanding that I am an ecosystem, that my talents, my passions, my seemingly random interests and ideas all contribute to the whole, that is what allows me to be a part of any other ecosystem. And just like a forest needs diverse species to flourish, my life, my personal way that I process things, and probably yours if you're here too, requires the full expression of my multiplicity to thrive. So with plants, I've been able to work with, what does it mean to flow? What does it mean to adapt? What does it mean to hide things? What does it mean to transform or evolve them? A vine doesn't second guess whether it should grow in a certain direction. It tries, it explores, it moves through the darkness before it reaches the light. It key. Why did I just say it? Because I got all carried away and my language skills went, which is what happens. Have you ever noticed that too? You have this intricate, beautiful, verbose way of speaking in a good way, and then all of a sudden you get all passionate and you go down to the most elementary of words. That happens to me all the time. All the time, which is, it's just the way things process, right? So my hope is that you can start to learn how to trust all these different detours in your life. And honestly, this whole thing that I'm talking about is the reason why in the Naturally Conscious community, I created these multiple membership levels. The multiple membership levels are exactly for the same reason, to be able to explore different parts of yourself using many different skill sets, right? In Seedling Sprouts, you're going to get a minimum amount of, you're going to get some experiential knowledge, right? You get the mini voyage that allows you to experience this relationship with plants in a way that is about the experience, right? What it is that you, when you do a meditation with this plant or you draw with a plant, then you get the book club. So a little bit of knowledge, but not so much teaching as much as what comes through books and what you can learn and glean from others. And then how do you integrate that into your own life in the discussions? And then the writing, the Sprouts Writing and Creativity group that allows you to then explore your own expression, give yourself different ways to process through using creativity, all these things. So it's kind of like the first steps of, let me feel my way through my multiplicity and let me invite plants to help me explore my way through this multiplicity. And then Blooming Sprouts has the next kind of big heavy hitters, right? Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom, which is a course, and it has dense with all this amazing information about life and death and about exploration of what it means to be food when you have a relationship with plants, and exploration of what it means to be an individual and yet interrelated. It gives you the whole next level of learning and experiential integration of it. And then the master classes where we start to apply all these things that we've learned, right? This continuing education of integration into life. And then Flourishing Sprouts, which is for people who are working one-on-one with me to have the individual face-to-face, one-to-one safe space, and then a leadership group that allows you to explore this in a safe environment where you can think at a higher level, where you can explore at a higher level. So all of these things start to bring together in order to see your life as that ecosystem, to be able to notice and honor your unique combination of talents and experiences. So to embrace all of your self, all of what you create and all of what you are, because they're both, as this source of strength. So basically, let's wrap this all up kind of in the spirit of the naturally conscious community by tying it all together and looking at how you can start embracing all of this multi-passionate self together. I want to leave you with this simple exercise that you can do to embrace your full essence. Now, I'm going to give you the exercise. Of course, you can at any point, come back to this, listen to it on your own, experience it on your own so that you have it. So this is an exercise to plant your full spectrum self. The purpose of this exercise is to invite you to really honor all these parts of who you are, to really just see that just as nature embraces every role and every element that is in an ecosystem, by recognizing and celebrating your own talents and passions and, well, dare I say, quirks, right? Because that's part of it too. You begin to align more fully with your true essence. So here are the instructions. I want you to find a quiet space. I want you to sit comfortably, and I want you to close your eyes. And when you find this space and you're sitting comfortably, I want you to start taking a few deep breaths to just sort of harmonize. Remember, when we take deep breaths in this work, you call in all of those plant allies, all those plant friends, every plant that is around you and far away from you. And you start to harmonize your breath with that breath of plants. So you start to really awaken your true nature, your plantness. Your body relaxes, you find yourself present in the moment. And then I want you to visualize a garden. It could be a garden, it could be a wild space. I want you to basically imagine yourself in a space around you that has an element that is co-created, and yet it has space to grow and be wild. So you're surrounded by all kinds of different plants, tall trees, vibrant flowers, vines, fragrant herbs. Like each plant has their own unique role and energy. And so here you are in this part that has been co-created with these plants and has space, kind of like a food forest or a vibrant permaculture garden, has a wildness to it, even though there is co-creation in your hand. And I want you to then connect to each part of yourself. As you look around this garden, I want you to notice how many different plants represent different parts of you. A towering tree could represent your grounded, steady qualities that rise to the challenge. A vine that's climbing towards the sky could represent your creativity and your adaptability to find a way to hook into spaces that are near you, to find a way for you to even ground when things seem flimsy or when there doesn't seem to be much at all, and that you continue to move and continue to grow outwards and upwards. You might see a flower in full bloom that represents you doing something you really love, a passion of yours that is shining in that moment, that is showing its beauty, its essence to the world. or an herb that is powerful in its size. It's taking on and representing that quiet wisdom, that nurturing side that is able to bring such amounts of healing, even if the healing of all types of healings, emotional healing, or, that soothing salve, that humble herb that shares so openly with the world. You might see moss that's covering a stone that represents your resilience, your ability to grow even in the darkest conditions, the way for you to soak in water, that wetness. Just look around yourself and see all the different plants and see them as mirrors to yourself. And as you stand in this garden, I want you to honor every part of yourself. Take a moment to reflect on all these different aspects of you, whether it's your many talents or your passions or multiple experiences that you've had. Acknowledge and accept them and bring them into you, and notice what stays with you from them. What do you get out of them? What has transformed, evolved in you from each one of these? Just as nature accepts every aspect of an ecosystem and has to work with it, you too. What part of you is great at destroying things? What part of you decays pieces and cleans up messes? What part of you instead shines and grows? What part of you is a support beam and a supportive side? Which part of you instead is an active creator? Honor all of these different parts seen through the reflection of all these plants around you. And then now imagine that you gather up everything that you have just experienced and gather it into a seed. This is the seed of your true essence, the seed of who you really are, of your authentic expression as a multi-passionate, alternative, neurodivergent person, an individual that is connected and interrelated while still being you. And I want you to plant this seed in your garden to represent the full spectrum of who you are. It could be parts of your career, they could have your creative projects, or simply the essence of just the fact that you're multifaceted. I want you to plant this seed, and I want you to commit to nurture this seed inside of this garden, which is you, your multifaceted environment, your ecosystem that interacts with all of these other beings, that is all of these parts of yourself coming and weaving together, your personalities, your abilities, your skills. I want you to call this all into the seed and plant it into the ground and commit to nourishing with curiosity, with freedom, with exploration. And then I want you to take a few moments and really ground into yourself the image of your seed growing into a beautiful, diverse, unique plant that represents so many of your strengths and talents. And I want you to really feel that plant breaking through the earth, coming out and starting to grow. And that your nourishment of this plant will eventually take it to thrive and flourish. And carry this connection with you always. In closing, I really hope that embracing the full spectrum of who you are, that jack of all trades and master of the whole, holds itself with you. See it as the gift that it is. Just like in nature, where every element plays its part to create harmony and growth, your diverse talents and passions are a part of a larger, beautiful ecosystem that is you, that interacts and connects across to multiple ecosystems. When you learn to see them as interconnected and purposeful, everything begins to align. You don't need to choose between your passions or fit into someone else's ideas of what it means to be successful. Instead, you get to define your own path, one that flows with natural rhythms of who you truly are. And remember that just like the plants that thrive by growing in their own unique ways, your greatest strength lies in honoring the multiplicity within you. Trust yourself. Nourish this seed, this plant that is starting to emerge. Experience and embrace all these different gifts and let them shape that masterpiece that is your life. When you do the exercise, here's some reflection questions for you to ask yourself after. How did it feel to recognize and honor all parts of yourself? Are there any aspects of yourself that you've been neglecting or undervaluing that you can see reflected in that garden? Because remember, you can always go back into this garden at any time and even focus on one plant to see that mirror and to allow and give space for that plant to grow more. And then you can come and focus on a different one or on the whole. And more importantly, what's one small action that you can take today to nourish the full spectrum of who you are? I'm so curious to see what changes in the way you experience your life when you let go of all of these societal expectations and instead allow your passions to guide you towards a life that feels truly aligned with who you are, that is authentic to you. And so I'd love to hear from you directly. Your journey and your perspectives are invaluable. And I'm excited. I get so excited to hear how you're integrating the wisdom of all of your many passions into your one interconnected life. So I invite you to join us in the Naturally Conscious community. This is the perfect space for multi-passionate, neurodivergent creatives, alternative thinkers like you who are looking to align their unique strengths with their true purpose, while building deep and meaningful relationships with plants, with people, with human people, and with your inner plantness. If you've been seeking a supportive community to nurture your evolution and creative journey, this is where you belong, and everything about it is in the show notes. And if you're feeling like there's so much you want to do, but you're not sure how to bring all these ideas together, I'd love to work with you one-on-one. As a coach, I help creative multipotentialites, especially neurodivergent individuals that struggle to adapt to this world, harness the power of all of their talents so they can create thriving businesses and deeply fulfilling personal lives. We'll work to get clarity on how all of these passions are part of your life's work, of your life's purpose, and how you can integrate the wisdom of nature into the work in your daily experiences. So if you're ready to stop feeling overwhelmed by your brilliance and start aligning with your true essence, I'm here to support you every step of the way. Let's connect and let's explore how we can do this work together and make your vision a reality. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. Sharing helps us grow this amazing community, and I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading this message. So many multi-passionate people live alone. They feel alone, and I want you, all of you, to know that you're not. We are all here. We're all in it together. We all need to thrive in order to accomplish the great work. So I'd be so grateful if you would spread this message. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me. I can't wait to see how you embrace your many passions and the wisdom that's always been with you. It's always within you. So that's it for this episode. Remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with other kin. Here, you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. Connect with like-minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.